there's a thinking of this topic that wants to be talked about today. There's certainly conditioning around being perceived a certain way and not wanting to be perceived a certain way, and that's just unavoidable. It's so interesting because the process of posting something on YouTube has really revved the conditioning, as I probably would have expected if I had to guess. And it's curious that something still wants to be shared. Considering the imperfections of the loud noise, the fact that I'm in an office with no windows today, and overhead light to light this in a way that is satisfying marginally. It's so imperfect. It's not something that's being controlled or like I don't want to be posting videos on YouTube. That's not a preference. I don't enjoy it. The conditioning really doesn't enjoy the spotlight, other people's judgments coming online, feelings of how do I do this? What do I do next? Are people watching it? Are people not? Why are people watching videos that are maybe not my favorites, and the ones that meant and felt very resonant are least watched right now, and on and on and on and on and on. And then a dislike. Wow, like, yeah. Because, oh, how much comes up with that. So thank you to the person who disliked. Genuinely, because more awakening here, more opportunity to see the conditioning when it tightens, and to see even as it's tightening around maybe the worst possible thing to a part of myself. Guilt of I should have been better. I wasted their time. Shame of like being seen, fear of, oh God, like what's gonna happen next? No one's gonna watch, or everyone's gonna watch and make fun of me. Like all of these things, the snowball that are very familiar. Like even in that tight reaction, the ability to feel the aliveness in and through that, and like almost the exhilaration of feeling an allowance of not belonging. And I think that's the topic that maybe wants to be touched on, that I don't belong. Like, I don't belong to a spiritual community, to a religion, to a doctrine, to a text. In posting these videos, maybe there's some misleading, because the aliveness just wants this vibration. These are going to be kind of woo-woo words because I don't have vocabulary to articulate. I don't know if there is vocabulary to articulate this in a grounded way, but the vibration of this energy wants to be connected and feed, if that makes sense. Like anyone who might be listening or coming across it feels like, oh, this is there's inspiration, there's energy, there's connection, there's resonance, and that won't happen with everyone. It just won't. And so the aliveness is kind of at a point when these videos are posted of like, get this out here, get this out to the world, and how do people do this, and not having energy to do much, like putting certain labels that are just labels. There's an affinity to those topics and categories, and there's no affiliation. There's no conceptual buy-in to belonging to part of those. And non-duality in and of itself, like the writings and the teachings about it have given some support and some scaffolding to what's experienced here. And there's like profound appreciation and beauty, respect, and I don't belong to that paradigm either. And so the things I talk about, like the words aliveness and conditioning, are probably the main things that are talked about here and that resonate. And so this may be confusing to watch if someone's coming from a different perspective, but I think more deeply than that, I feel a sense of not belonging in a liberating way, just around rejection, which is interesting because the fear of being disliked may be one of the most primal threats to survival in my background and conditioning. How could something so scary be liberating? Well, again, I don't belong to a religion. And growing up in the Catholic Church, those stories are accessible to me, and the sense of Jesus Christ has been coming up in this for me, in that he was not that I feel that I think saying this can feel tricky because there seems to be like a comparison. I don't feel like I'm different than anyone else in being able to compare myself to him and his life, because he would say, love thy brother as thyself, right? There's such clear pointing in his work of we are all one, and the politics and the fractioning of the church created hierarchy, but that wasn't his message. And in the feeling of not belonging, in my intuitive and spiritual sense of him as a human being, who, by the way, had his moment in time and then it passed, but what we're holding on to is all those moments. In the same way that, like, part of my conditioning is holding on to the one dislike on my YouTube channel, and that was one moment. on top of one moment of my speaking about some aliveness, that both of those have passed. And there's just an artifact, and how skillful the mind can be in trying to create those. That's a dislike, that's a thing that exists, or that's a video, that's a thing that's really me. And then this similar with Jesus, you know, the Bible and his teachings and his church and him. He was a man, an incredibly clear and alive and authentic man from what's sensed here. And my sense is he wouldn't resonate with trying to hold on to too much solidity in who he was, that he is everywhere. And in this experience of not belonging feels that there's a reflection in his experience of not belonging. He was not celebrated by the people in power. He did not, his speaking to truth was very dangerous. And I think that's not, maybe it is, what I've encountered. Sometimes there can be a I don't want to compare, but spiritual awakening isn't heaven in the way that maybe heaven has been idealized. It's not that we arrive at some blissful state. To me, the process of crucifixion and being outcast and feeling that not belonging and knowing that there is nothing to belong to because you are never separate. Of course, relationships are so important. Of course, there's a foundation of brotherhood and sisterhood, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this idea of belonging that really dies in this process. And the process of speaking truth and listening to awakening doesn't ensure that anyone will approve of you. That's not what this is about. And if I really wanted approval, I would be producing and creating these videos in a different way, and I'd probably be talking about a lot of different things, and I would probably not be talking about my disability, my health. I probably would not, I would filter more provocative things that are just coming up and wanting to be named. And I don't want that to feel like that's reckless and that other people aren't cared about in this process. It's just that caring happens very differently when it's not needing belonging as a thing, as an attachment, as a projection of needing something from someone else. true belonging is knowing that we are already love. And that could never not be true. And the movement from that realization is so different. It's recognizing and seeing in that person that disliked me that there's love there. And that they can dislike me. I certainly dislike things all the time. And it's very easy to be critical of spiritual authorities and people who talk about the most sacred things because they're sacred to us, and we don't want them to be contaminated, and that's fine. So I don't know what I'll title this if this ever gets out. I don't want it to be sarcastic, but I also want to just celebrate a bit of the continued unfolding of all of this in the ways that it continues to